I'm Eric Barnes of the Daily Memphian, and welcome to The Sidebar, the weekly show on the community, arts, culture, and more. Today, we're talking with Holly Whitfield, digital director for the Daily Memphian, but also an author of a new book, 100 Things to Do in Memphis Before You Die, the 4th edition. So stay with us for a conversation with Holly, and thanks to Tresment Manor, which sponsors this podcast. Hey, Holly.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited and energized because I found out a week ago that my book is publishing in a couple of weeks.
And let's get on the promotion bandwagon.
Right.
So this is, you've written a book, Secret Memphis, Weird, Wonderful, and Obscure, that came out in the wonderfully timed May 2020 time frame for book publishing.
Perfect.
Always good to come out during a pandemic. And, promote things that people could go do and see. And so anyway, I'll go on about that. But this is cool. So this is the 4th edition of 100 Things to Do in Memphis Before You Die.
Right.
Your friend Samantha Crespo wrote the other editions. And
yes.
Talk about what the book is, and I'll shut up, and how you end up taking over for this edition and so on.
Sure. So Samantha Crespo is a longtime Memphis writer. She works in the tourism field, and so I knew her from my past work at Memphis Tourism, but she did the first 3 editions of 100 Things to Do in Memphis Before You Die. They're from a press in St. Louis called Reedy Press, and they kind of reached out to Samantha way back, like 2012, 2013, and they were like, we want Memphis to be one of our first cities that we do this 100 Things to Do Before You Die. And she ran with it, and she made the first one. She did 2 more, but it's been since 2018. And when they wanted to do a 4th edition, which, as we know, is going to be really, really different from 2018, Samantha and her family had moved to California, and so she and I, again, friends, colleagues, she was like, I give you my full blessing to take whatever you need from the past editions and to rewrite this. So that's what we did. And what ended up happening is it took a lot longer for the 4th edition to come out than maybe people would have liked. But
being unnamed people.
Unnamed, wonderful, patient people.
Who work for publishing companies.
Not the Daily just for a variety of reasons. I had a huge life change. I went from writing the I Love Memphis blog, working at the Daily Memphian. That was a big change. A lot of stuff in Memphis has changed post-pandemic. I mean, it's like as fast as I was writing, things were changing. And so it almost felt like we needed to take some months, some time before we got settled to be able to condense, the things you must do in Memphis into 100 items is like a fool's errand, really. But we're just trying to do the best we can. And so that's what the book is. It's a list of 100 things, places to go. Before you die, it's, super, super fun.
Before you get COVID. Oh, no.
Yeah. Before you die,
I'll get COVID.
Whatever. So it's just, it's your bucket list. However you want to phrase it, however you want to think of it. The important part is that I've selected these things that I think really show what Memphis is like now. Yes, there's lots of history, but there's also stuff that's just open in the last couple of years, stuff that's new, stuff that's old. I think if you went through and you did these things, and it's really quick to read, it's just like 1 or 2 pages for each item, super fast, simple, guidebook style. I think even if you've lived in Memphis a long time, you would find something new that you haven't done or something maybe that you've been meaning to do, and hopefully this will encourage you to get out and try it. And if you're new to Memphis or you're visiting, then it's definitely going to be handy. I mean, if you read it, then you could kind of make your own itinerary. I actually did put together a couple of themed and seasonal itineraries in the back of the book as well, so you don't even have to do that for yourself. Yeah.
And we talked a lot about the food section in Soundbites, the food podcast that you and Chris Harrington co-host that appears on WYXR right before the sidebar, or you can get it wherever you get your podcast. So we'll talk some about food because we talk, it's there are no rules in this, but talk about, it's not meant necessarily to be best of Memphis.
Right. Not necessarily.
And it's not necessarily, there are good things in Memphis that you left out because you're trying to give this a particular snapshot and experience. Is that a fair way to say it, or you say it?
I think that's a good way to say it. A lot of the stuff is the best stuff, but a lot of it's also like, hey, if you go to these outdoor spaces that we have, if you walk across the Mississippi River on Big River Crossing, if you pick one of these breakfast restaurants, if you pick one of these barbecue restaurants, here's a couple of places to catch live music. If you pick and choose from these things, you'll get a good feel, and you'll have a good time. I mean, they're all fun. That's the thing too. I mean, we've got a couple of tough history museum moments in here, but I think overall, like, you're going to have a good time.
Yeah. You talk about the outdoor spaces. It is like if this book were written 10 plus years ago, there would be so many fewer outdoor spaces. You know, I mean, Overton Park Conservancy had maybe just launched. Shelby Farms, the big renovation, I don't think was finished 10 years ago.
Nope.
The bike lane, bike lanes, not so much, maybe some. The Green Line, the main original part was built more than 10 years ago, but not all the extensions and the connections to things. Let alone Tomley Park, the other stuff down on the river.
Exactly. And all of that made it into the book.
Yeah.
And then it's also just taking from Samantha Crespo's work in the past editions. Some of this stuff has been more developed out. Like, I don't want to give it all away, but like one thing that I kind of talk about, and people know I love the Wolf River Conservancy and I love their work.
Oh yeah, another great example.
Yeah, paddling the Wolf River is one of the coolest things I've ever done at Memphis. I don't think a lot of people have done it. A lot of people are like, ooh, Wolf River, what? But if you learn a little bit more, it can be a really beautiful place. But also in that entry, I call it entry, it's just, the couple of pages for each item, I talk a little bit about the Wolf River Green Line. That's going to, traverse Memphis. It's not even finished yet, but it's so much farther along. And I did incorporate kind of the new Tomley Park into the section about the riverfront. But I just kind of approached it in a new way, even if some of the items are the same. Although none of the titles are the same as they were. This book was rewritten totally from scratch from the third edition.
Just want to say. You just threw it into a Chat-GPT 5 model and it came out new.
I did not touch a Chat-GPT.
That's just how we do the Daily Memphian.
That's just, the whole thing is written by Chat-GPT. So whenever it doesn't make sense or sounds...
People think Bill Dries is a real person. No. Chat-GPT. Sam Hardiman, Chat-GPT 3.0.
Chat-GPT wishes it could be Bill Dries.
He is. Does kind of have an AI level knowledge of Memphis, but that's a whole other thing.
Exactly. No, but so, kind of originally I was like, oh yes, 4th edition. I'll just make sure that everything's up to date. And then they were like, no, you're gonna rewrite from scratch. And I was like, all right, well, that's going to take a little longer. And then it was
things that aren't in there from 2018, which is 6 years ago, which kind of blows my mind.
Time ago,
that was sort of sad. Like, oh, dang. Right. That's gone. I don't want to dwell on the negative, but there had to be things like that.
I'm trying to think.
Certainly some restaurants, right?
Certainly some restaurants.
Especially with a pandemic.
And that's just how it goes.
That's just the way it's going to go.
As I said on the other pod, I was really making sure this was as up-to-date as it could be, like, up until hours before we were printing it. And so, like, one of the riverboat companies closed. It's not giving rides anymore. So, like, that's not in there. I don't know,
Yeah.
Time goes on. I did focus more on, like, what's new as opposed to sort of what we've lost or, like, explaining, like, the Pink Palace versus Mosh and how that goes.
That's compelling reading right there.
I know. Okay, well, actually, I think it's pretty good.
No, I'm sure what's in Mosh / the Pink Palace is interesting, but like the name change is not in and of itself particularly interesting.
I think it can be confusing for people, though.
Yes. Oh, yeah, it's totally confusing.
And so if I can shed a little light on that, I'm trying to think of ones that I like cut out.
No, that's all right.
But I don't.
I know, it's kind of negative. Let me just remind everyone, we're talking to Holly Whitfield, who is, among other things, digital director at the Daily Memphian, co-host of Soundbites, our food podcast, and the author of the 4th edition of 100 Things to Do in Memphis Before You Die, as well as the author of Secret Memphis, Weird, Wonderful, and Obscure, which came out in 2020, May of 2020. And we'll talk about that book as well. And we'll talk about some of the places where you can get this new 100 Things book and some events that Holly has coming up, as well as more of the content of the book. But let me take a moment to do some housekeeping and remind everyone I'm Eric Barnes. This is The Sidebar. It airs on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11:30, right after Sound Bites, hosted by Chris and Holly. The Sidebar is focused on the community, arts, culture, and everything in between. It's also available as a podcast on the Daily Memphian site, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. It is also one of a number of podcasts we do. The Grizzlies podcast that Chris Harrington does with Drew Hill, the Memphis Tigers podcast, and again, Soundbites is also available as a podcast. I mentioned WYXR. If you are not a supporter of WYXR, please do consider joining, becoming a member, doing a one-off donation. It's nonprofit, listener-supported radio. You can go to WYXR.org or download the WYXR app to donate. You can also get archives of this show, sound bites, all the talk shows, all the music shows. Great way to stay in touch with WYXR. Also, if you are not a subscriber to the Daily Memphian, please do consider becoming one. We are nonprofit, reader-supported, I guess I should say, local news, the largest newsroom in the region, and we rely very much on your subscriptions. So please do support us. Recently on the sound bar, we were calling it Side Bites.
Side Bites.
Because when we do these home and away, we do the two shows after the other. It's like a side bite, but I decided to call it a sound bar. Recently on the Sidebar, we had Birdcap, the artist who's got a really cool work on display here at Crosstown right now. We're in Crosstown, flooded out of our office, doing this in the central atrium. So you'll hear some noise, and that's totally normal because we're in Crosstown in the central atrium. We also had Matisse Moore, who's the head of Boys and Girls Club of Memphis. He was so interesting. He was like super interesting. His story was really cool. Came from Denver, ended up here, just took over Boys and Girls Club. Is just a really fascinating guy, and somebody we'll probably have on Behind the Headlines at some point soon. We also had Christine Weinrich. That's coming up next week. She is the head of the Memphis Library Foundation. We pre-taped that, so I know exactly what she's going to say, and it was really interesting because it's always interesting to talk about the library and all the many, many, many things they do beyond books, even though obviously books are at the center of what they do. We've also got Joshua Burgess, who owns Lucy J's Bakery here in Crosstown. He's coming up soon, talking about bread, talking about baked goods, and talking about the great mission that they have with Lucy J's. I think I mentioned Behind the Headlines. I probably did, that we do with the good folks over at WKNO. We've had recently two members of City Council on, Jerry Green and Pearl Walker, two new City Council members. Had a couple of state legislators on, London Lamar and Brent Taylor. We also did a two-part interview with Paul Young, the new mayor. All those are available at WKNO.org or on the Daily Memphian site, or they're even available as podcasts wherever you get podcasts. And this week we've got Shondale Ryan, the new head of the Downtown Memphis Commission, coming up on Behind the Headlines. But we're here still with Holly Whitfield.
I'm still here.
Yes, you're still here, right here. I can see you. No one else can, but I know you didn't leave during all that housekeeping, and I appreciate it. Yeah, Natalie Van Gundy also sees her.
I'm a real
Natalie.
Girl, yes.
Although we don't have a mic for Natalie, so this way she can just make snarky comments. On Behind the Headlines, people think you're not real because I talk to you and you talk to me, and people don't realize like you're talking to me through my ear, and I'm either doing hand signals if we're actually recording, or I'm talking to you and people think I'm nuts. It's a whole thing. It's a figment of my imagination, as Bill always says. Meanwhile, 100 Things to Do in Memphis Before You Die. We'll come back to, let's talk a little bit about where people can get the book and some of the events you have coming up.
Yes. So the book, I think, is officially released on April 1st, but it should be in all your local indie bookstores, which are featured in the book, naturally,
Nice.
including like Novel and Burke's and some other ones. You can also get it at secretmemphis.com. I'm just going to keep the same website as I did for my first book and kind of put it all the information on there. So you can order it directly from me, and I will sign it. I will write whatever you want, pretty much, in the front of the book. And
within reason. Be reasonable.
Be reasonable, and send it to you. A lot of people for my first book asked me to write notes to like their friends or whoever they were giving these to as gifts. They make nice gifts for moms and dads and people, all the people.
Wow. Yeah.
That's the feedback that I got, at least.
Yeah.
Secretmemphis.com.
People say.
Local bookstores. Yes, you can get it from Jeffrey Bezos. And
he needs the money.
All of that. So all is well.
He's building spaceships.
He's building
and
spaceships.
He needs the money. to keep building a spaceship.
But I am not building a spaceship. I don't know what I'm doing, but I will also take the money. So secretmemphis.com, and then on social media, I'm going to be providing some, updates and more information, answering questions if people have any and want to know more about stuff in the book. And then events, I am going to have a party at Cameo at the bar at some point in April. Stay tuned for that. That'll be.
Am I invited? Is that an invitation?
You will absolutely be invited.
I'm excited.
Everyone will be invited. I'm also going to do an interesting one with Stacy Williams-Ung, who is a Memphis artist. She does public art and murals, but she also creates oracle decks, which are kind of like tarot decks, but not. And she does like Southern themed ones. So she and I are going to team up and have an event at Elmwood Cemetery on April 18th, where she's going to talk about one of her oracle decks that focuses on Memphis music heritage.
Oh, yeah.
It's called Rhythm and Blues. And I'm going to talk about 100 things to do in Memphis and maybe some of the stuff from Secret Memphis as well. And it's going to be like an hour. We're going to both have a short chat. We're going to have some wine, sell some books and some oracle decks, and I think it'll be really fun. So that's going to be April 18th. I'm going to support Snowden School at their community festival on April 27th. I'm a sponsor for that event, and I'll have my books there. And then I'll do a little signing on May 2nd at Burke's during Cooper Young Night Out. And there's more. We talked about a book fair on Soundbites, but you'll have to switch over to hear more about that one.
Yeah, that one. That's good. Let's talk about Secret Memphis, Weird, Wonderful, and Obscure.
Yes.
Came out in May 2020. What is that for those who haven't found it, seen it, bought it?
So the books are similar, but they're also very, very different. So Secret Memphis is more in depth, and it definitely focuses more on, these are my criteria for the secrets. The secrets either had to be something that people truly did not know, or they had to be maybe a place or an event that they knew about, but they didn't know the story behind. And so I did a ton of research and going out to places and talking to people and figuring out exactly what is going on with this weird broken down cemetery that is next to the Home Depot in Midtown. So it's the Bettis Family Cemetery, and that's the first entry in Secret Memphis. And so as opposed to 100 Things to Do in Memphis Before You Die, in Secret Memphis, I'm telling more of the story. I'm going into it a little bit deeper. And I bring that one up because I remember Chris Harrington was so kind to write a little write-up about Secret Memphis when it came out. And I was very surprised he did not know about the Bettis Family Cemetery. And so that's cool, tell somebody something they didn't know. And maybe an example of one that people do know about but don't know the story behind. This is my favorite one in the book. I'll just tell you. It's the Chickasaw Mounds that are by the Metal Museum downtown. And just, maybe that there's Native American mounds down there. Maybe a little bit of the history. About the Marine Hospital, Metal Museum. That whole area is soaked in so many stories. And I, at one point late at night, doing research on just that park there and everything that had either happened there or is being observed there through the plaques and the statues and stuff. I'm reading some text in Spanish from a conquistador. I speak a little Spanish.
Wow.
And I'm reading some old, firsthand account of the people who came and landed on the Chickasaw Bluffs in Memphis. And, that's on the plaque at the park. I could have just read it there, but I just went down this rabbit hole on Google Books and checking out books from, whatever and reading it. So that kind of story is hard to tell in a couple of pages. So don't get me wrong. This isn't a long, in-depth series of stories in Secret Memphis, but that one was really super fun for me. The Sex Pistols Taco Bell is also in there. So
yeah, that's a fun one.
That's a fun one. Secret Memphis, definitely a lot more research and longer, but 100 Things to Do in Memphis Before You Die is really bite-sized. You can just really flip through it. Maybe somebody who's a little more casual.
Right.
There are some things that are in both, but I approach them differently. So.
We've talked about this a little bit before when I've been on Soundbites, and we've talked about coffee shops or places to work and best places. I think we did a Soundbites, me and Chris, I think, best places to work. So writing-wise, where you like to write, I think you've said, writing in coffee shops, writing in. Yeah. So do I. I tend to at this point in my life, I tend to write in bars more than coffee shops. The ideal place has good coffee and wine. So that's just a dangerous, wonderful thing for me. But why do you, I don't know if I've ever asked you this, why do you like to write in coffee shops? And we're talking here writing this narrative, creative writing. I mean,
Yeah, it's nonfiction. It's creative, but it's definitely nonfiction. I think I like to write in coffee shops because it's hard for me to write in my house. I can definitely do it, especially if I'm doing short stuff, but I have a really tiny house. I live in a little shotgun house. So I like to get out and get to a different space where there's nothing around me that's distracting me, but also it's not so empty that it's weird. And there's a little bit of that white noise from people coming in and out. I also need, the caffeine or the hydration and snacks. And, there's also the whole ritual of, okay, I've got to get up. I've got to put on some kind of clothes that aren't hard pants. Isn't that what we're calling it? Yeah, hard pants that aren't like yoga pants or leggings.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. Although I think leggings work just fine. Anyways, I digress.
The funny thing is, for me, I only write in leggings.
Well, never knew it.
That's not true. There's nothing about that.
Trying not to crack up. Okay.
There's a whole Richard Simmons thing going on there. It's just got really awkward really fast.
I digress. But, getting all your stuff together, it kind of gets you in the mindset, having the right pen, having the right computer, having the right notebook, all that stuff. I think that's a pretty common experience for writers or creatives. Yeah. And so getting out to the coffee shop helps me do that. But also, I did write a lot of Secret Memphis, the first book, at the library.
Because you were researching.
Because, I was researching, and I did do some research for that. I did some research for 100 Things to Do in Memphis as well. Yeah. But also, if you don't want to spend money, if you're, trying to save a couple of bucks here and there and not buy all the coffee every day.
Yes.
I would go to the library.
Yes.
Pre-2020.
Because I like to write I'll write in my home as well, but I like to write in public spaces. And you talked about the white noise and the motion. I've decided that's one of the biggest reasons.
Yes.
There's even though I write with headphones on, but you still kind of hear. And there's this motion. And I think part of it for me is that writing is just, and for me, I'm talking about writing fiction and writing books, which takes a long time and it just takes forever. And it is in and of itself such a solitary thing to do that when I'm in phases where I get up really early and it's dark in my home and I'm writing at my desk, it just sort of reinforces that isolation of the writing alone while you're writing alone. And so I like that motion. And then there's some interaction with the barista or with the waiter or the bartender.
Or all the people that that
or
come
the
up
people
to you
who
because
come
you're
in.
Eric, yes.
Yeah, or the people who are, I don't know how you write and how much we've talked about this, but a lot of times I print everything out. So I've got this stack of paper and a pencil or a mechanical pencil and I'm writing that way. That will draw people from far and wide who are finally like, I have to interrupt you. What in the world are you doing? And this is a thing, because I'll take it with me sometimes when I'm traveling and I'll have, these pages. So there's a certain amount of human interaction in the midst of what is fundamentally a totally solitary thing. Yeah. Whether you're writing, a section of 100 Things Before You Die, and Chris has talked about some of this too, where he's writing a 1,500 word Chris masterpiece on basketball, food, and culture all in one. I think it's that solitary thing.
I think that's a good point. Yeah. And it's also interesting. You talk about you're writing by hand or you've printed stuff out and you're marking it up. I will go first to the computer. I'm typing into Google Docs. Yeah. But when you hit those moments and it's just not flowing anymore, that's when I kind of pull out I'll force myself to handwrite something.
Yeah.
I did that, at moments when I'm tired. I've written 80 of these.
Yeah.
I've got 20 more.
Yeah.
And I need to get that juice flowing again. That can work. Also though, sometimes you're just doing stuff in your life and you're just getting groceries or you're in the shower or whatever and it comes to you.
Yeah.
And so I also have written a lot actually of the second book in the notes app dictated on my phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the time that
you'll dictate.
Yeah, I'll turn on the voice and it'll record and it's 70% correct of what I've said,
Sure.
but at least it gets me on that thread when something comes to me of how I want to open a story or open an entry. And then, by the time it all gets edited, I don't know how similar it is to the thing that I typed into notes while I was picking out chicken salad, but you got to start.
I email myself notes, and like there's a whole set of short stories I wrote that were very much written as emails to myself, standing in my kitchen, because my kids would say some kind of insane thing that then would get turned into a full-blown short story. And it was just years of that when they're still really fun, but there was this really fun period, and I would just write all these notes to myself on my phone, and I still have these long lists of emails, and I still do some of that.
Whatever works.
Whatever works is really the answer. Because now I'm writing with a tablet and a pencil, which I like. It's not as good as a pencil, and that was an Edge Alley thing, which I think I talked about, because he wouldn't allow, at Edge Alley, may it rest in peace, Tim would not allow laptops, which wasn't too bad for me because I was a person who already hand wrote. But then I got to where I had so many pages, and so I basically would cheat and use a tablet. But he said I wasn't cheating. He actually confirmed when I interviewed him.
Where the line was.
Yeah, with the postmortem on Edge Alley. He said, no, I knew you were doing that, and that was allowed, and I felt good about that. A couple minutes left here, again, with Holly Whitfield, talking about 100 Things to Do in Memphis Before You Die, the 4th edition, which is coming out right now. We talked a lot about the food and drink entries on Soundbites. People can get all that. What do you think? I don't know. Will you do another edition of these? Like, would you welcome that in X number of years down the road? Either 100 or Secret Memphis. Would you do another?
It's too soon. Like I told you, I truly finished like the final edits on this like a couple days ago, and they're like, "We're going to print it on Friday," and I was like, "Oh wow, okay." I do think in a couple years, a second edition of Secret Memphis would be. I would be definitely up for that, especially because I did write this one as a new first edition. I wouldn't necessarily have to start it totally from scratch, but especially in some of these places and talking about people in Memphis and history, like we've done so much more, whether it's with like civil rights issues, lynching sites, and that side of things, and also more with like the food and the drink scene. Just being able to dig into that more. And there's a couple things that like have changed or aren't there that were in Secret Memphis, that was written in 2019. But I just think approaching it from like the post 2020 world would be good. And also I think that you hopefully get better with experience, and especially working at the Daily Memphian, and not to just like plug everything here, but like the precision and accuracy that we require in the work that we do. And I think my research skills have improved, and writing skills, like, some really, hard journalism. I think that a second edition of this book in a couple of years could be really great. So if you're listening, Reedy Press, you probably don't want to think about that right now. And I don't either. But we could put it into the ether. There's a freight train coming. We could put it into the ether,
Almost out of time. I can't remember what your first concert was.
I can't either.
What did you say?
It was like a third day, like Christian, like whatever concert.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what was the last concert you've seen right now? When's the last time you went to a concert?
Have I been to another concert since I went to Nick Cave in Nashville last fall, and we talked about it on the WYXR Pledge Drive?
Oh, yes.
It's sad if I haven't gone to one, but I do have tickets to see the Decemberists in Oregon this summer.
There you go.
So we can talk about that after that.
All right. That is all the time we have. Holly Whitfield, you can learn more about the book. Follow her on social media. Go to Smart Memphis. Secret Memphis. SecretMemphis.com. That is all the time we have this week. I'm Eric Barnes. Join us again next week.